everyone. Welcome back to the Wellness and Growth Journeys podcast. I am Elisa Garnes, founder of the Wellness Growth Agency, where we help women-centered health and wellness businesses grow their practices and connect with clients through strategic digital marketing. Now, today I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Dr. Kristen Jeanette Kennard. Ooh, Kennard, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here with you.
Now, Dr. Kristen, you are a board certified licensed professional counselor, psychotherapist, and behavioral health consultant specializing in women's mental health, anxiety, stress, and relationship challenges. Now, as the owner of Full Bloom Counseling and Consulting, you are dedicated to helping individuals, couples, and families thrive through innovative counseling and coaching strategies. Now, you're also an advocate for reducing healthcare inequalities. And on top of that, you are a mom of 3 and living your life to the fullest.
That is true. That is true.
And today we are going to get into your strategies, your journey, and just get some practical advice from you about overcoming stress and mental health challenges. And we hope also that you might be able to share some powerful insights on the future of women's behavioral health. And so, guys, you don't want to miss this. So please stay tuned for our full conversation that will be packed with knowledge and actionable tips that you can apply to your own life or practice if you actually want to start one in the health and wellness niche. Now, welcome again, Dr. Kristen. Could you share with us what inspired you to specialize in women's wellness and prenatal mental health? What sparked that passion for you?
Oh, wow. Well, I would say it's been a long journey. When you get to my age, you take it all into consideration. But I think early on, as a young woman in my early 20s, and even before, coming out of high school into my early 20 years, I had experienced several things that really had an impact on my life, both positively and negatively. But, for the things that we experience that typically have some kind of detrimental impact to us, it creates some kind of change in us. And so I realized early on that some of the challenges that I had required that I receive some counseling, therapy of some sort. And I was never opposed to it. Some people come into that space with, the idea of being, um, told that you have some kind of mental health issue, a mental health challenge. Well, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew that I did not feel the way that I wanted to feel. And many of the experiences I had really had an impact on my life. So I had a very early counseling experience, I say in my early 20s, and it was with a Black female psychologist,
Nice. Uh-huh.
which I think back at that time, and I'm saying back at that time in the early 80s, it was never anything that I had seen or even heard of. Mid to late 80s, actually. And so that really had an impact on my life. She had an impact, very significant impact on my life. And so that drew me really into my passion for counseling and therapy. But as a young person, I was always that person. For my friends, I was the one that they could come to. I always had some advice and those kinds of things. So I'd like to think a lot of it is just naturally who I am.
Yeah, you
But
need that in your group of friends. You need that
yeah,
one person with a sense of
I
reason.
was her. I was her, but I was also the one. I was her, but I was also the one that was hiding a great deal of pain and discomfort. And so for me, to some degree, it was therapeutic to be that
Right.
kind of support for someone. At least I was giving. In that degree, I didn't realize how I was giving out of my own pain. But today, now that I look at the work that I do, I'm not working from a place of pain. It's really passion now. And so
Nice.
I remember what it was like to feel what I felt, to not have the answers, to be a young woman trying to come into herself, having relationships and, my body changing and periods and, moodiness and everything else that we have that
That
happens,
comes with
and
life.
not knowing what to do with any of that,
Right,
Um,
right.
And then, but as I have journeyed and now not just being a young woman, but then becoming a mother and a wife, and all of these things have helped really shape who I am, but even more so my practice. I like to say that there's nothing that I've been through that I can't use. There's nothing I've experienced that I can't use. And so I bring all of that into the counseling, the coaching, the therapeutic, the consultation space. I think all of those things have significantly impacted me. And so, even more so as it relates to behavioral health and my transition into more working somewhat in the primary care space, specialty care space, along with counseling. A lot of that happened um, during my last pregnancy and having been on bed rest and having had twins and the
Ooh.
experience after that, not really, there was a lot that happened to me during that time period. It was 9/11 happened, and there was just a lot going on. And I developed quite a bit of anxiety, which I didn't understand it as that at that time. I felt really isolated, although there were people around me. I felt lonely. Um, and so you can feel all those things and still have people around you and supporting you. And so as I, would check in with my doctors and think they were just never touching that place for me. They were never asking about how it was feeling other than physically. And of course, I received a lot of attention at that time because I had twins. And so there were just things that were missed at that moment, but I was missing it too. So that's just a part of how I came to be so passionate about this. And now at more of the later middle stage of life, and now there's perimenopause. And listen, there it never stops.
It just goes, right? I mean, it's such a roller coaster. Well, it's such a well. I don't know. There's like so much unknown, and then there's also like when you get in it, then you know, and then you're confronted with these new set of challenges or these new experiences. Because you were talking about you having twins, and I can't even imagine how the support was because when you have one, I was talking about that the other day. Like they do doctor visits, and they start to increase the closer you get to the due date. And, the doctor, the OBGYN, she's monitoring everything because she wants to make sure that you are okay, but more importantly, the baby is okay. So you get like this extra level of care. And I remember saying this. And then the babies come, and I don't know how it was for you, but then there's nothing. Like you go home with these tiny humans and you're expected to keep them alive and you're expected to know exactly what to do. I was telling a lady that I was speaking to that I called the hospital that I had my child at probably every day for like 2 weeks, asking about different things like, oh wait, is his navel supposed to look like this? Do I need to put something on it? I'm not really sure if I'm breastfeeding him properly. I'm not sure if he's hungry. I'm not sure. Should this be happening? Should this, what's happening when he's like hiccuping, burping so much, like not burping, like having so much hiccup. So, and then there's like the crib death, the fear of that. And I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but I literally had so much anxiety about that when my child was born that he would be sleeping, and I kid you not, my hand would be rested on his back or
Mhm,
chest
mhm.
in bed. He had his own little cot, and I would be laying down, and I would not sleep as tired as I was, and my hand would be rested on his back, just to ensure that he was still breathing. And if I fell asleep, I would wake up in a like, and then I check in and I'm looking at his, and I'm pretty sure this is not anything new in the experience. And I did, but at the time I thought it was, right? I thought it was just me who was just overreacting about these things. And I'm looking at his little chest, And then I get a sigh of relief when I see it moving up and down. And I would put him to sleep and I would leave the room, and I would be relieved when I hear him wake up and start crying. I would be relieved to hear him cry because that means he was still alive. The anxiety, oh my gosh, it was so overwhelming. Um, and I guess a little bit suffocating because then it means that I can't rest, right? I have
Yeah.
to.
Well, there's always, for a new mom and dads too, there's always a bit of hypervigilance. And what you have described perfectly is what many moms experience, but we often don't tell people. It's, often underreported because of what you just, it's like this, am I going crazy? Is there something wrong with me? And actually, it's not, your level of hypervigilance is times 100 at that point. You're right. You have a small child in your home, you're responsible, and you've never been here before. Now, in my case, I had a daughter prior to that, but it didn't matter. Each child is different. And so,
Exactly. And then you had two, the two at one time.
yeah, so it's understandable. And again, I think also I will say, because I can speak for my community because it's the one I grew up in, the one I lived in. I know often in the Black family, it is assumed, right? Because our ancestors, they're, our great grandmothers, they were having 10, 13, 14 kids, right?
Yeah.
And you have this one, and they're like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I think we get that too, right? I think, especially when they got more experience, they're like, well, like been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, established a business on it. So, like, yeah, you need to like get it together, but you won.
And what it is though, there are lots of factors that come into play when you're talking about. It doesn't mean that they didn't have anxiety or depression or ever felt overwhelmed. It wasn't talked about then. And so often it's not talked about now. It's not anything we pass down. And so there's this idea that we should be strong, and we should be, but not in the context of, if something is wrong, if you're feeling off, you need to say something. And what we do know often with, the postpartum depression or anxiety that occurs for a lot of women, and there are psychosis, and there are a couple other things that can happen postpartum. The number one thing that contributes to that is a lack of sleep. So, I mean,
Yes,
we've all
yes,
seen the movies where they have someone, either they're interrogating or holding hostage, and they're keeping them awake like 24/7. Like they're,
yes, yes. That's
and
a
they're maybe
torture,
not eating well. And
right?
okay, if you keep me up like that and don't let me sleep, I'm going to be off too. And it
Yes,
doesn't matter if I
yes,
had a baby. So it
yeah,
makes sense, right? We're trying to make sense out of something, or make a difficult. We're looking for a problem that's not really there. It makes sense that if you are sleep deprived, if you are at some significant sleep deficit, that how you move and react will make you do some of the things that you're doing, putting your hand, watching the breath to go up, and like it's gonna happen, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so again, if we could normalize some of what you just described, um, and not pathologize it in such a horrible way for a lot of people, I think more women would be more forthcoming, whether it's experiences postpartum or midlife or with your cycle, or maybe you have painful periods. And I had that kind of experience. I had issues with infertility, and I miscarried, and there were all these other things that we don't comfortably, we're talking about it more now, of course.
Yes, yes.
But it's still a little stigma attached to some of these things, and a little bit of miseducation around it all. And so I find joy in being able to, not just the practice of counseling or therapy, but it's the education around it, so that we can remove stigma, and we can remove the fear of being able to address the very things that one, impact our mental health and impact our ability to just live, full, fulfilling lives.
And that's one of the reasons, and thank you for that, Dr. Kristen, because that's one of the reasons why this podcast exists. I realize that we keep it hush hush. We probably only discuss certain issues in certain groups or communities where we might feel comfortable sharing, but it's not something that we speak openly. Like, no one wants to say, hey, look, yeah, I suffer incontinence. You don't want
Yeah.
to shout
Yeah.
that out from the because it's seen as like this negative and something's wrong with me. And this is not something not that you celebrate it, but it's not something that you talk about openly or share because it just has like this negative kind of connotation or negative outlook, or maybe it's really like a self-inflicted kind of thoughts that we have. But no one wants to talk about the bad stuff that we go through, even though it's quite natural for some of us. It's quite um it happens to a lot of us, you know, and but there's just like this negative just cloud kind of hanging over these things, and I really want to be able to discuss it because you will find out one, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right? There are other women who have been through or are going through the same things that you are going through. And then, two, you have the opportunity to find out what remedies are out there, are solutions that can help you cope or deal and get better with whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? So that's really the main focus of this podcast, to make the connection, to bridge the two between
Right.
women who want and need help with things that we we kind of push under the rug, and we say we deal with it, when we don't. We just kind of bury it and put it and with the people who could help us get over these kind of issues. We think something is wrong with our body. We're going through certain anxieties about certain changes in life, career wise, getting married. I was speaking to a guest recently, and she had a baby.
Hmm.
She was studying. She was getting married, and she was pregnant with her second child. And I'm just looking at her going, you are a powerhouse. I don't know how you, well, of course, it was a huge struggle for her to get through all of that. And she was panicking about all kinds of things, like finance and, proper rearing a child. And then she wants to advance herself in her career. And so all of these things are colliding at once. And then how do you kind of traverse all of these things that are happening, right? And she probably would have benefited from counseling,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so that she could come up with a plan to how to tackle all these things. Because nobody is saying that because you're pregnant don't mean that you can't do nothing. Because I think that's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I think what you're speaking to is we mothers, women especially, women who happen to be mothers, often or going to be mothers and wives, and we don't know how to balance it all. And there's always, we all know the term work life balance, and I don't believe in that. I just don't believe that you're ever going to get to a place where there's this equilibrium as it relates to work, and then there's your life. Things are ever changing. Your life, your world is always evolving. And so, what I think of for most women like that, and if I were working with someone like that, I would probably ask her to just really place a hard stop in her life and figure out, okay, what is most important right now? Because for some reason, and I know we know where some of this comes from. It's just kind of embedded in the fabric of some of it. It's just innately us, but then it's also embedded in the systems that we operate in, that women are supposed to be able to do all the things. Well, we may be able to do all the things, but why do we have to do all the things at the same time? And
True.
so multitasking, I used to I was the poster child for that years ago. Like, you got a baby in one arm, you stirring the pot with the other, you answer the phone with your foot, this kind of ridiculous stuff. And I realized that, and I've read some books and things over the years, and it's some mentors and few others, like this is not something to stick your chest out about, because you can do all the things at the same time. Because when you really get up to the core of it, you're really not accomplishing what you think you are. You're really not always meeting the mark. And this is where the fatigue and the disappointment and all these things come in. We need to take a hard stop. And when you think about balance, I see balance not as something to achieve, I see it as a place. right? And so you get to balance, a place of balance, when you have some level of self-awareness about what you're doing, why you're doing, self-actualization, all these things. What are you hopeful for? What are you moving toward? And so often when we can just place those stops there, right? Self-care is part of being in balance, right? Um, and a lot of times I've learned to, it may seem really silly, but when I counsel and coach some women at times. And I've been doing this a lot more because it makes sense to me developmentally. So I have some women that will say, "Oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I got all this, and I just don't know how to do balance it all, and I'm feeling stressed out." And I'll just say, "Well, so just stop doing that." Now, I went to school a long time, and that was never part of our theoretical training. It was like, just stop. Like, just stop doing that. And and you know why I say, and I think of it because you think about our children. When they do something, what do we tell them? We just say stop. We don't give them always a whole explanation. We just say stop. Don't do
No,
that.
you're right. You're right.
And we expect them instantly to respond. So now those of us, we're adults with all of this knowledge and ability. We have the ability to read, and we have skills. And why can't we just say to ourselves sometimes, just stop doing it?
Yeah, you don't need to. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're
we just
right.
make it too deep and too difficult sometimes. Sometimes it just requires looking at yourself and saying, just stop it.
Yeah, yeah,
And not in a mean way. It can be uncomfortable to do that, but it's necessary at times. And so I find a lot more courage now. Before, I'm trying to figure out this thing when we like to pathologize so much in the counseling and therapy space. Like, if it looks, yeah, you got to have, if it has these features, then it must be this. Why can't it just be that you're just making a poor decision? You're overtaxing yourself. You're pushing yourself beyond your limits, and our bodies are not created and designed for that. Just stop.
yeah. And that's a tough lesson. That's a tough lesson, and I guess it is tough. What is it called? Tough love. I guess it is tough love, and tough to hear when you're trying to achieve all these things, and somebody just stop, just take it, because you don't have to do all of this at the same time. No one's telling you to stop, pursuing your dreams or anything, but just stop doing them all at one time. I like that, and that's some tough love. I was talking to, uh, and I don't even remember how it came about. I think it was my husband, really, when I was telling him, like all the work pulling on and that kind of stuff, and he was like, "Just get some help." And it's almost like it didn't even occur to me that I could do that. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's true. I could I could do that." He's like, "Yeah, all the things that you hate doing, just pay someone to do that for you."
We often have a voice of reason embedded in us. I would say that even spiritually, but also just common. Something, there's just a voice there, and often we blow past it. We tune it out. And we know when we're at our limit. And many times, like I said, either we can ask for support, we can ask for help, right? We don't have to do it all, but there's just something, I think, innate about women, that we feel like that we have to do it, or we have something to prove, not even
Yeah,
just to others
yeah,
all the time, but to
to
ourselves.
ourselves,
And that,
right?
but a lot of that is rooted in how we see ourselves, how we think of ourselves. These, what we call, there's a doctor I follow because I'm really passionate about brain health.
Right.
Dr. Amen talks about ants, these automatic negative thoughts that we have. And so sometimes we're just not on the surface conscious about the things that we have been telling ourselves over and over and over again. And they often fuel that kind of behavior to, work in ways that are pretty deleterious to us, or, are really going to deplete us. And we're just almost on autopilot for that. And so this is why stop is important. I just, I've never been in my car and saw a red light and said, maybe I'll stop at that. I don't know. Like, you stop.
True, true. No, you gotta
Like, you
stop.
just stop. You don't
Yes,
think about it.
Yes,
Especially if you
that's
have your
true.
child in the car, you don't say, I mean, of course, there are emergencies and things. I'm not talking about just in general. Stop is very powerful. It is. Stop at red lights. We should stop it. We may roll through a stop sign just a little bit. We still tap on the brake a little bit, but stop means stop.
Right, right,
And
right.
so there are many things around, and when we feel pain, we'll just kind of stop, right? Most of us. But when it's mental, we often blow past that. And I think it's because if there's something that's occurring with us from our neck down, we are really quick to take care of it, right? We get
True,
our x-rays,
true, true,
we do all the
true.
things that we put a band-aid on. But much of what we are encountering a lot of times, especially if it's mental, you can't see it. It's in our head. So we're seeing behaviors associated with the pain or the discomfort that we're having. Um, it's okay to put a cast on your arm if it's broken. People get that. Like they would not see your arm mangled. And you say, "Oh, yeah, I know it's like that." Somebody's going to say something to you about that, right? And
Right,
you want
right,
them to.
right.
But
Yeah.
but because we can't always see the physical manifestation of mental health, we see it behaviorally, right? We can see it physically in some things that people do, but we associate it with behavior, hence behavioral health. And so the one thing that is hardest to do is to change behaviors. It is breaking habits is
So
is
hard.
harder than breaking a bone.
It's so hard. It really is hard. That's why addiction is such a big thing, right? Because you get into a habit of even something like smoking cigarettes or having the social drink or whatever, and then you get into this habit, and before you know it, it's oh, you should really stop that, but you can't, or is a struggle to do it, because it's habitual for you. You probably tie it to certain things. Like when I worked at our local newspaper for years, there were a good set of men who smoked, and so whenever it got really stressful in the newsroom, they would go down and they would have a cigarette, and they would come back up, and they end up, as more stress came on, they end up downstairs every hour, right? Just smoking out. So it became like a habit to them. Whenever stress occurred, then this was how they dealt with it, quote
And
unquote.
and what they're not realizing is that, that whole cycle, you're stressed and then you go smoke, that nicotine starts to wear off, the stress rises up. It won't stop, right? And so again, here's another stop. Like we have to address stress, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's very significant, especially in women's health. Stress, we always hear, like, high blood pressure and all these other things, these silent killers. Stress drives a lot of mental health challenges.
I believe it. I believe it because on top of balancing, yeah, well, whether you have a partner or marriage or not, so you're balancing your relationship, and if you have kids or not, right? There's mom guilt. That's a big kind of uh topic, right? So myself, I battle with that a lot because I'm a career woman. I want to push my business and the podcast and so on. But then I still have a little one who needs me, and I want to make sure that I have enough time for him. And then it's like, am I giving him enough time? So you get the pressures from the career side, and then I guess some of them are self-inflicted, but then you also want to make time for the one. He didn't ask to be here, so I'm like, you know what I mean? I don't want to neglect him, right? And then you have a partner, you also don't want to neglect them. So it's like, as all these things kind of come in, and you only got so many hours in a day, right?
Mhm, mhm, yeah,
So the stress of that, and then there are other things you want to achieve, like perhaps you want to get a car, perhaps you want to get a house, and those things aren't right now in the near future. So you're stressed out about that. You're stressed out about financial things. You know what I mean? So many things in the world that are seeming so negative right now. So you might stress out about that, right?
yeah.
Um, so there are a lot of things that can be stressful, or that you could take on, and you don't even know that you taking on this thing, and then it affects how you sleep. it affects, like you say, it affects your body. You start getting a pain here that I can't get rid of this pain here. You probably get some headaches. You're probably not eating properly because you stressed out. So I agree with you. It's such a big thing, and it's like a silent killer, like you say, because of all these things you might unknowingly do that would affect you physically.
And lifestyle matters. Yeah, it really matters. You touched on some of the very important things. When people are going to their primary care office, that's for their primary care visits, we know that, and the numbers change, but basically, we know that about 40% of office visits for primary care are um, for mental health challenges, but they're manifesting physically. And so you have the neck pain, you have, all these other things. You're having constant headaches or back pain, all these the other things that are digestive, issues. And a lot of them are rooted in the stresses. And if you're stressed long enough, you can then develop some type of chronic anxiety, depression, like all these things. Doing that to our bodies can really manifest um, mental health conditions. And so you're going to primary care because your back hurts, but it really is you, right? You're just stressed or you're not sleeping and poor sleep, poor nutrition, lack of exercise. These are all of the things that if we could just get on top of that, especially as women, if we could get on top of that, we have pretty much put ourselves in a position to really experience good health for a very long time. But again,
Right.
we are not often willing to make those changes. We go to the doctor and we just want things fixed. There's about 47% of prescription drugs for mental health challenges. They're written by primary care physicians,
Right. Right.
right? So we know there's this correlation here, and but it's not. And this is what I love about some of the work that I do, to be able, whether I'm dealing with the OB/GYN community or just primary care or some other specialty care, um, to bring these issues to like to most doctors. It's a little different now, maybe, but years ago, and I'm not talking about long, even as far as like 2014, 15, doctors were not trained to ask questions about your mental health. Even now
Right.
that we
Right.
have assessments, and they're not
I,
trained,
I
it's
don't
not
think.
something they do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so this is why you're saying it when you ask them about integrating behavioral health. It really is into that primary care or specialty care spaces because of the numbers. We know people are presenting with these mental health or emotional health challenges, behavioral health challenges, and they're not being addressed. One, it's not necessarily just that the doctors are completely unaware or they don't want to do it. They don't have time. They just don't
Right.
have time,
Right.
and they're not all
Right.
being negligent. It's just they don't have
It's
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because to actually sit down and try to
Hmm.
get down to the root of the issue, yeah, you need to have a conversation.
And they can do it though, the more that we have support there. And even in my practice and being cross trained the way that I am, so I am looking for rule outs, right? So I'm not just looking at, there could be a number of reasons that you may have anxiety. It could be your thyroid,
Right.
but you
Mhm.
think it's just
Mhm.
this relationship that you're in with this guy who keeps ghosting you or won't call you, won't, is there for you one day and then he's not the next, and or it's your kids because they're getting on your nerve. Like we can think of all of the reasons why we're experiencing those things. But what if your thyroid's out of whack and you just didn't
Right.
know it? Right? So, there that can be true, but then also the reverse is true, that this relationship is driving you nutty. Your thyroid can be completely okay, but when you're in a doctor's office, we're checking all of these medical things because you're having headaches. Okay, let's get a CAT scan, or let's,
Right.
right? We're doing all these things, but never inquiring about, well, what's happening at home?
Right. Right.
What's your lifestyle like? How many hours of sleep do you get? Yeah.
Right.
So, it's all of those things that are really important, especially when you're dealing with women, because we like to do all the things, and all the things it land us up in our healthcare provider's office.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to knock doctors because I know all of them are probably not like this, but I have experience, and maybe it's because of that traditional Western medicine thing. Hey, these are the symptoms that you're having. This is how it fits in the textbook. So therefore, this is what I will prescribe. But I remember, I think it was last year, I was having what I felt was, or what I thought might have been extreme acid reflux. Um, but it was painful, and I was having this pain in my chest, and it was so horrible that I couldn't sleep. It wouldn't stop if I stand, sit, lay down, nothing. It was just constant. And it was horrible. Like I was pretty much hunched over. I was in so much pain. So I went to the doctor, and I was, I spoke to the nurse before I went into the doctor, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds like acid reflux." And I was like, "Really? Like, is acid reflux is that bad?" And then I went into the doctor, and he did his, exams, and he asked the questions and so on. And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, this is acid reflux." And I was like, "Really? That sounds, I've had, in my opinion, had acid reflux before, and it was never this bad. Like, I'm actually in pain." And he said, "Well, just take, I'll write up this stuff for you. You take these, and you should be feeling better by the time you get home, right?" So I was like, "Okay, well, I believe you, but there's something in my stomach that was still telling me there's no way that this is acid reflux, because I am in so much pain, right?" So I said, "Okay, well, you're the doctor. You're supposed to know what's going on." So I got home, I took the medication, and I was so nauseous taking it, but I still took it and everything. I was like, "This pain is not going away." So then my husband was like, "Well, just give it some time, and maybe the medication needs some time to work, that kind of thing." So I've been doing that. So this was like maybe the Thursday that has happened. By the Saturday, my eyes, I had jaundice. My eyes were yellow. I looked in the mirror. I was like, "Babe, my eyes yellow?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "This is definitely not acid reflux. No, and there's no way." And I called the doctor's office. I'm like, "Listen," and the whole thing. I came, this is what I got. But now my eyes jaundice. There's no way this is acid reflux. So went back to the doctor. This was another doctor that saw me this time, and this doctor, in my opinion, now really was listening to me, right? So like by the next week, maybe the Monday or so, I'm getting blood tests done, I'm getting ultrasounds and stuff done, and I felt like it should have been like that from the get-go. And I was really annoyed, because I felt like you didn't really try to get to the bottom of it. Like, you,
Mhm.
in textbook, this is the symptoms or whatever of acid reflux, this is the medication to treat it. When in actuality, I had gallstones. And I had to get my gallbladder removed, and that was, and it apparently happened when I was pregnant. From what the surgeon told me, my muscles and everything would have relaxed, and then I was eating up my cravings and everything. So these stones would have developed from 2-3 years ago, from when I was pregnant, and only started to flare up. And I think one actually came out and lodged somewhere. So then there was like a backup, and that's why I had jaundice, because the kid. It was a whole thing, but that story, experience was just a really good example to me for about digging deeper and really, like, if there's something, right, just do all the tests to rule out things, because I had all sorts of things in my mind about, do I have cancer? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not, eyes do not turn yellow.
Well, I think what you're tapping into is really important. And I mentioned a little while ago how much education is important in my practice. I do a lot of educating and encouraging, and I'm not always looking for the problems. I like solutions. But what I will say often with women, and what I enjoy about the work that I do, is being able to teach women how to advocate for themselves with healthcare providers. There is there's some this unspoken intimidation that anybody can feel, but often women do, because sometimes we don't trust ourselves with our own bodies, and it's often because we're not paying attention. And so, to really be in tune with your body to know when something's wrong. But also, and I say this, carefully, um, I have a respect for our healthcare community. I have a respect for healthcare providers and medicine and all of that. Of course, I've worked in that space. But there's nothing that can replace your own common sense. There's nothing that can replace you implementing good habits, lifestyle habits, eating as healthy as you can, exercising. Like there are lots of things. The research is there and the data is there to support that by doing those things, we can eliminate a lot of issues. We can. Now, the challenge that you had could still have developed, but my point is that in the grand scheme of things, we're often feeling something off and we go right to the doctor instead of saying, okay, wait a minute, what am I doing? How much sleep have I gotten over the last few weeks? Right? And people don't realize that, if you're staying up late 3, 4, 5 nights in a row, it takes weeks for you to make up that sleep deficit. You can't say, oh, I'm going to go to bed at 8 o'clock and then 8 p.m. and I'll get up at 7 out and I would have, restored my sleep. You cannot.
Telling me you can't catch back up on
You
that.
can't do that. And so, but what I like is that where we have to be advocates for ourselves in that healthcare space. It sounds a bit cliche and old, but I still work with clients and patients who struggle with that. Like I can go right when I was in primary care, I go right in the room and I'm getting all these things. I said, well, did you tell your doctor that when he was in here? No. And so I don't criticize that, but I highlight that to say that it is really important. Primary care doctors or general practitioners, people like they're primary. If you're going to have one of those, they should know everything. That's really their job to know everything about your health care.
Like a family doctor.
Right, right. And so that's their job. And even if they don't ask the questions, then you volunteer the information. Often, when I'm working with doctors, one of the complaints they have had, patients are not forthcoming with all the information. So, but where I hold doctors accountable, especially in the mental health space and in working with anybody, but particularly women, is that I told you before, for roughly 47% of the prescriptions for mental health illness or challenges, issues, they're written right in the primary care office. But that primary care provider may write that script. That's treating symptoms. It's not getting to the root or the cause of why you may be experiencing the level of anxiety you have. So when I consult with doctors and when I speak with them, listen, if you're going to write this script, then also take the responsibility of saying, hey, you should see a mental health care professional, just to see maybe how you can address the anxiety or the depressive symptoms. Don't just write the script and send the person out the door, which is typically what happens. But fortunately, I have the pleasure of working with some providers who will not write that script unless you are going to a provider. They will not write it and they also will not refill it if you are not. So that's where a lot of the consulting comes in that I do, where I'm able to work with other providers, definitely in the maternal care space if I'm working with the OB. And then, it's just being able to as well be accountable to yourself, right? I think when you were describing, you did your lead work, right? You figured out what actually was going on, and you knew how to advocate for yourself. But that's not necessarily what happens all the time. And
Right,
so when
right.
we're looking at women's wellness and women's health, we have to learn how to be great advocates for ourselves. And yes, you mentioned Western medicine. Like there's a certain way things are done here. When you're abroad in other countries, medicine is not practiced the same way. It's not even viewed necessarily the same way. We are quick to treat and pathologize everything. And so I think to some degree, we just need to be able to take a step back, and look at your lifestyle, look at what you're doing, see what changes you can make. Also, check in with your healthcare provider. But many of the things that we are encountering, we could alleviate or avoid if we just made some basic changes in what we do, the normal things that we do every day.
Right, right. Um, and with that, then I was going to ask, I guess maybe advice or tips that you could offer for women who will be struggling or might be struggling with stress and perhaps mental health issues. Like what? I mean, I know it's like, hey, get help, but like, What else can they do? What advice can you offer them who might be
Well, I'm pretty practical in my approach with that. First is the education. Um, it's quick for, I know, providers like myself to go in and we want to get someone's history, and then we're starting to attach labels and all these different things to what we think something is.
right?
Especially when it comes to mental health, and I always talk about this. It is, when you talk about the brain, it's the one organ in the body that if something goes wrong with it, meaning just generally, not like a concussion or some other type of serious brain injury or damage or dementia. Like we diagnose everything without even seeing it. Use
Right.
a set of symptoms, right? And we say, if it lines up this way, then
This
this
is
is
what
what
it
it
is.
is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I struggle with that as a provider. But I would say what we really need to do for women, just really know your body, right? Really be in tune to your body. Um, try to make the adjustments that we know are helpful. I go back to the lifestyle changes. Sleep, right? Make sleep a priority. Make it a
Yes.
priority.
Yes.
And I'm preaching to the choir. I know what it is to, you get on your phone, you're scrolling at night,
It's
you're doing this
true.
mindless stuff because it feels
Yeah.
good, but you could be asleep, right? Our
Yes.
eating, stress will make us, and we know this, we will may eat a little less than optimal if we are stressed. So address the
Yes.
stress. What
Yes.
are the things
Yeah.
that are stressing us? Give that time, give it attention. Don't overschedule ourselves. That's something else that we do. We
Oh my
overschedule,
gosh. It's
and
so true.
and we hurry ourselves. We hurry our children. This is why you're right. We're modeling all of this anxiety and stress for our children. So slow down. Why are we in such a rush all the time? It's why we make mistakes or blow past certain things that are going wrong with us because we're too much in a rush, right?
Right.
Um, eating, I'm all for what is most healthy. I don't even have to name the things. We
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah, we know.
right? We know what that is. We see now in healthcare, like everything's being changed now. BMI is not what BMI was before. A calorie is not what we thought a calorie was. Just do the absolute best that you can. There's no one who doesn't know that. And I say that with this one caveat, knowing that the best that one can is going to vary. It depends on your income, it depends on where you
Hmm.
live, right? There are a lot of social determinants of health that factor into how you can take care of yourself. And so even in this space, when we're talking about women's wellness, we have to take those things into consideration, that everyone doesn't have access to the same things that someone
It's
else does.
true.
And
It's
so this
true.
is why I say, optimally, what's the best that you can do, instead of saying, "Oh, well, you're not eating enough greens." Well, what if I don't? The market in my neighborhood doesn't carry fresh vegetables the way that some other one's neighborhood would, because they live in a different
Agree.
location, right? So
Agree.
I take all of those things into consideration, but just the lifestyle matters. Um, choosing joy, choosing to have peace, like all of this is a choice to some degree, right? There are some things that we can't do things about, but even in the worst of circumstances, we have choice. We always have choice. It may not be, we can't make the same choices that someone else will. But I think that's
Right.
really
Right.
important when you're talking about your well-being and your health. Like, we have choices. Let's use them wisely. And if you're not quite sure, then get you a counselor, get you a coach, get you someone who can help you make some of those lifestyle decisions, who can address some of the mental health challenges and help you, you know, have a better perspective on how to live life, right? If people say, well, there's no manual for this. Well, no, but there's some things that we know, and there's some things
Yeah,
that
some
other
guides.
people know, right? So I like to go to the people who know. Is with
Me
all that I
too.
think I
Me
know, I
too.
don't know
Yes.
anything, right? I
Yeah.
never think that I call myself ever learning, and I think that's what we should be too. Always be in the know. Want to know how we can do something better. I would, and advocate for yourself, not just with others, but advocate for yourself with yourself, because we are often not kind to ourselves and our own worst critic, and we don't treat ourselves well all the time. Advocate for yourself with yourself.
I love that. And actually, that's a different answer. Um, I guess that I had in my mind. I guess it was like, yeah, you gotta sleep good, you gotta eat properly, and then get help. But the advocating for yourself, I think, is huge. I think I feel no like it's understated. Um, when you know, like you say, you listen to your body, you know your body, and yeah, like no, this is what's happening with me. Um, because you would watch videos of women on YouTube, especially if they, I don't always talk about cancer, but like you say, like they're talking about them having cancer and stuff, and you would hear some of them say that they knew something was wrong, right? Um, and they went to get checked out, and some of them, unfortunately, would be misdiagnosed or and it wasn't caught earlier, that kind of thing, or they had some sort of feeling or symptoms or something, but they didn't get it checked out until perhaps it was, a bit too late, or that kind of thing. So I do think getting help as soon as, and then continuing to push to get the help that you deserve, and that you need, in whatever, whether it be physically or mentally, like you say. And the other thing too is that I don't know how it is no in America, but in the Caribbean is actually quite taboo, to talk about therapy or talk about you getting therapy, and also might be seen as a shame type thing if you talk about, like, what's wrong with her? She gotta get therapy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of seen as a negative thing. So I'm really hoping to kind of desensitize that stigma that we have, as people, as women, when it comes to getting help outside of going to the doctor, for your body, but for also going to the doctor for your mental side, like the mental side of things. Because on top of what we're going through now, we still have what we've gone through in the past that limits, and holds us back and affects the way how we think and we act, and what we believe. um, because yeah, it society back in the day told us that women should be at home and raising the kids and taking care of the home. So now that I am a career woman, that's still there, right? You're like, well, I still have to take care of the home because that's my job as a woman. But then I still running the whole company, right? So I have to do this. But you don't. I am one to be like, listen, if I gotta hire a cleaner, if I gotta hire a cook, I can make the money and we gonna get that.
And this is what I'm saying. It's a choice, right? When I first had my children, I had my oldest daughter, and my twins are almost 4 years apart. Almost. I remember talking on the phone one day, to someone. I think it was maybe an insurance company or something. I can't remember, but I was telling her what I did, and being at home, and she was like, how do you do that? How can you stay home with your kids? And I know you used to work, and I said, I made a choice. I made a choice that at this time, this is what I would do. But there are things that happen when you make choices. So choosing to, let's say at that time, stay home with my children for what I thought were so many years, the important years for me to slow down my own life so I wouldn't be overwhelmed, meant that I had a car, but it wasn't a new car.
Right.
Right? It wasn't, you know, the thing that just rolled off that year, right? And it was in good condition. It got me from and my children from where I need to go. I had that. I had food in my home. I wasn't going out to, expensive restaurants and doing all the I wasn't there's a sacrifice that we make. And often we are sacrificing our mental health, our physical health,
Exactly. Hmm.
instead of sacrificing the things that really matter. And it doesn't mean we
Exactly.
can't work it, because I did all that too, right?
Right,
It's
right,
just knowing where you are in any given moment. And if you are saying this is too much, then stop it. Do something different.
right.
Don't keep doing the same thing and complaining about how hard it is. Right? Like there are some things, and I granted, I get it. I say that knowing that there are some women that have to work and they have to take care of their families. There are lots of women who are doing that and doing it well, and or to the best of their ability. So it's not, but there are some things. I don't care anyone. You can look at the landscape of your life at any given moment. If there is something that you may say, I don't need to do this right now. And it could be a small thing, right? And so it's checking in with yourself constantly. So if it's, you've had a long day, do I really need to be, I really want to watch this movie, because a lot of it's just getting the stress off. But I probably do better to go to sleep. At
Okay.
least try that,
Yeah.
or take a bath
Yeah.
and have some
Yeah.
kind of routine that helps me relax, other than, it doesn't mean we have to do it all the time. But again, it's the self awareness that we need. That's part of balance I talked about earlier. It's a place you get to where you have this awareness that this is what I want, this is who I want to be, this is kind of lifestyle that I want. And there are other things that you have to do to get yourself in a place where you can be really content with how you're living and what you're doing. It's not a one shot thing. It's consistency and reminding yourself to
Right.
do it over and over again.
Now we have gone completely off script. I don't know if you knew.
I don't know. I'm
But
following you, Lisa.
we got off script from I think from the beginning. And listen, I ain't mad at it. I am not mad at it at all. That just means that I ain't gonna get you part two. We ain't gonna get part two. So we
Well,
can
how about I interject this for you?
right.
You don't need a script. And that you don't, because conversationally you've brought up all of the right things. And this, what you're talking about now, I would rather do this with a woman than some structured counseling therapy session. What we often need is just have a talk
Yes.
about these things and let it be free flowing and let it go wherever it goes, because we're not going to get everything all at once, but we do need to, as women, do more of this, whether we're on screen or one to one. Let's just talk. Some people, I heard someone say to me recently, they wanted to transition to coaching with me, because they have what they call therapy fatigue. They're tired of it. Like, we're doing this thing over, not with me.
It's very clinical.
It's
Yeah.
very clinical and it's important and it's necessary. But sometimes we just need to have a talk,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that changes everything. But I would be more than happy to come back for sure.
I appreciate you, Dr. Kristen, and I really enjoyed our conversation today. I don't know. Is there any lasting words? What I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to share your credentials, not your credentials, your contact information. I'm going to have it on the screen, and then I'll put it in the bio, especially in YouTube. So if there are any women who want to get in contact with you, they can do so. And I know you probably might want to see them in person, but you also offer virtual.
I do a lot of, yeah, I do virtually. More currently, most of what I do is virtually, but I do other things in person as well.
Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share with women who might be navigating their own health and wellness journeys? Anything that we haven't mentioned, because we mentioned a lot of
Hmm.
things. You just first of all, stop. If it's too much, stop. Just do an audit.
Yeah,
I like that. Do an audit
yeah,
of what you got
yeah. I
going
like
on,
that. Yeah.
and then just say, all right, not
Hmm.
I'll do this next year. I'll do
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm. The same things
I
we're telling our kids when they're little.
yes,
Do that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Let's not be
Listen to your
hypocritical.
body.
Listen,
Yes,
yeah. I would
listen to your
say,
body. Hmm.
I would say, to be honest, change, I mentioned it earlier, is really, really hard. And
Yes.
so and by that, I mean, it requires courage to
Hmm.
change a thing, right? It means allowing yourself to be what I would call reasonably uncomfortable, right? And so, we can be a lot of things. We can be We can be powerful. We can, we're brilliant, right? We're brilliant creatures. We're beautiful, but we also need to be brave.
Right.
We need to be brave about taking the steps that necessary to make the changes that we need in our life. It doesn't have to be comfortable, right? It's reasonable discomfort to get to something better for yourself. And so I would, really implore us to um, be okay making change, be okay with the discomfort that comes along with it, because surely we enjoy all of the blessings and all the good things that come from doing that, right? But it's
Right.
a process, and so just
Yeah.
be open to it, and and have great expectations, right?
Right.
Often we move into spaces and start to make changes, and we're not really expecting something good to come of it. But we can. Let's increase our expectations, right? Raise our level of expectation to have and to live the kind of life that we want and we deserve.
I like that. And that's a good note to end on. And to be continued. Definitely. I definitely want a part two. We didn't get into the prenatal side of things. I really wanted to get into that. So, and then I know you did some stints in international waters. So I definitely want to talk about that next time. And yeah, any other things that we might miss. And when this episode comes out, our listeners, viewers, if you want Dr. Kristen to expound and or expand on anything that we spoke about today, please reach out to me. Any comments, or I'm everywhere. I trend everything. I on Threads, I on TikTok, I on Instagram. Listen, y'all can reach me anyhow, except at that small signal or Morse code, because I don't know how to decipher that. But everything else digitally, y'all could get in contact with me. So if you want, if there are any questions or anything, topics or anything you want us to cover, let me know. Reach out. This podcast is for you and for me and for women everywhere who need just help traversing life in general. Um, and we need the help. So yeah, reach out and don't be ashamed or afraid, and let me know what you need. So thank you again, Dr. Kristen. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's my pleasure being here with you and behind the scenes. You have a beautiful spirit, and it's just I applaud the work that you're doing. This is so necessary. So thanks for having me.
Thank you too. Thank you for joining us on another Wellness and Growth Journeys podcast. Now, if you're inspired to elevate your health and wellness business, the Wellness Growth Agency is here to guide you. We specialize in tailored digital marketing strategies to enhance your client engagement, grow your practice, and improve overall satisfaction. Let's unlock the potential of your business together. Visit us at wellnessgrowthagency.com to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more insightful episodes. Until next time, keep thriving and remember, wellness is a journey. Growth is the destination.